Welcome to this episode of the Veteran Business Community Podcast, where this week I'm chatting to Matt Newlands from Frontline Mental Health. Now, Matt started this business after his experiences 10 years as a South Australian copper with Rafi's, Adam Mason and Narelle Mason. So fantastic veteran-owned business. But today we're going to be talking about Matt from the copper side of the house and his experiences in the police force and what led him to create with Narelle and Adam, this fantastic business, Frontline Mental Health. So stick around. Matt Newlands, VBC Pod. On this episode of the Veteran Business Community Podcast, I'm talking with Matt Newlands from Frontline Mental Health. G'day, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing really good. Thanks, Pete.
Mate, it's a pleasure to have you here today. First of all, tell us a quick one about Frontline Mental Health. Where are you and what do you guys do?
Yeah. So Frontline Mental Health we're down in Adelaide at Torrens Parade Ground at the moment. Currently, we've been around since 2023, and we've been working predominantly with military first responder organisations and have now spent a fair bit of time with the corporate side of things as well as local government around providing customised and authentic mental health and training solutions to organisations, as well as providing a bit of the mental health support as well. So things like counselling and EAP services. So whilst we're based in Adelaide, we provide services all around Australia.
Fantastic, mate. And we'll tie into the military story in a second, but you were a copper. Whereabouts did you grow up in the world?
Yeah, so I grew up down south of Adelaide and wanted to be a cop since I was real little. And then that came to fruition when I had left school. So not long after high school, I'm fortunate to join the South Australia Police. And I was then 10 years with South Australia Police. Did a bit of country policing in amongst that, predominantly metropolitan stuff, but got out in 2016 with some of my own mental health challenges, which is why it is that I now, I guess, work in this space and ultimately why we formed this particular business and Frontline Mental Health as a result.
Yeah, brilliant. Now, I'm really passionate about first responders and the fact that, my perspective is in the military, we are quite lucky to have organizations like the Department of Veteran Affairs and other more formal structures. But it feels to me like that first responders, maybe are less so supported, particularly on transition. But just to tie this into the military connection, your business has got some fantastic military folk involved. Let's just give them a shout out and tie them in, and then we'll come back and talk more about you.
Yeah, for sure. So the other co-founders of the business are very good friends of mine, Narelle Mason and Adam Mason. So Narelle did 6 years with the civilian police here in South Australia and then went on to do 10 years in the Air Force. And then we've also got Adam. Adam's still current serving Air Force. So he's been 17 years now in the Air Force as an AEA flying on the P-8 Poseidons. And his role in the business is more of the back of house stuff, but certainly can't be underestimated in any regard. He's doing all of the policies, process, procedures, invoicing, and I think that's a massive asset then to the business, is having someone who is aircrew, who is very much process driven. That certainly helps keep probably Narelle and I in check when we come up with all of these good ideas and have all these, wonderful things that we can play around with and focus on. And Adam kind of keeps everything, with a pretty tight left and right of arc, and then puts a policy behind stuff as we go through. So, they bring a very unique skill set to this particular business.
Mate, what I'd like to talk about is just a little bit more about the daily life as a copper and challenges that you go through, and for whatever you're happy to share publicly, the things that led you into Frontline Mental Health. But a quick story is so for me, being in the Army and doing deployments as a logistics officer, I was not exposed to tremendous amounts of trauma like other people in the military have. But it just makes me, again, tip my hat to some of the first responders, whether you be fireys, police, or ambos, who actually probably do more of this every single day. I've got a mate up here. I'm not sure whether I should or could share his name. But his job up here is he's like the body guy. So anytime there is a death or a fatality in the civilian community, he's out there. That's his job every single day. So I was chatting to him, having a beer the other night. He's like, big week for death this week on the coast, and this is, whereas in the military we get a lot of support. There's a lot of institutional programs to help people through mental support. What's it like as a copper? And can you just share what's it like on a daily beat?
Yeah, no, and they're all very valid questions. You raise some really important points around the difference between the military and the first responder space. So, I guess the first responder space is all very much state-based, which I think is why then we have not inconsistencies, but rather differences amongst maybe what New South Wales police get versus what South Australia police get, which might then be different to what Northern Territory, ambulance service, St. John's up there might get. So it's all very much a state-based approach. Which can make it pretty challenging as opposed to military, where we've got organizations like DVA that sort of have that capture all. The challenges themselves, you raise some important points there. Policing is quite a unique role in community. And I think, which is why probably people often ask questions when they are introduced to a police officer. There's lots of questions that they've got because it is a pretty unique role. You're right in that even the way that your friend talks about, the big week for death, we can often normalize a lot of these experiences. And that I think comes with its own challenges as well when we talk about the first responder space. It becomes quite normal. So for me, I didn't really have a huge amount of mental health training or knowledge during my time in the police. So I think the challenge that comes with that is then when we think about checking in with people and asking, whether they're okay or not, often for a lot of people in these roles, they're not even sure. They might think that they are, but they don't know what, not being okay actually even looks like or feels like, because we've normalized maybe some of the day-to-day stresses and challenges that we're faced with. I think for me, I joined when I was 20 years old. I went to the academy. I turned 21 at the police academy. So when I came out, I was still pretty much fresh-faced and brand new at life, like, to be fair. And so then being confronted then with some really interesting scenarios and circumstances where death becomes quite normal, traumatic experiences become quite regular. These are sort of the everyday experiences where I would come home from work and maybe even then like speak to my wife and how was your day, those type of conversations. And even just the difference from, I guess, what her day looked like not being in the police versus what my day looked like. And one particular example, I remember she was sharing that a challenge at work with a difficult customer who was yelling at her. And in my experience that day, I had just been involved in a 4-hour incident where a person had basically held themselves and their partner at siege, if you like, at the house, and had ended up causing some significant harm to themselves. So this was my day at the office, was then trying to restrain this person, get them to hospital for care. And it was quite a highly stressful situation. That was just a Wednesday, like that's just kind of the thing that we can kind of get used to. So it does come with its own challenges when everybody else around us in these roles is going through something similar. We often then find that the nature of the role, say the rosters, the rotating shift work, becomes really difficult to maintain friendships that are with people outside of the role. And I appreciate there's a similarity there with military personnel. When you're posting every couple of years, it can be very difficult to have civilian friends because, what's the point? You're going to post in a couple of years and you have to disrupt everything. So first responder space, we come off night shift on a Friday morning, and for us that was the end of the week and it was our night time. So we would be sitting at a restaurant and we might be 3 or 4 beers in at 9 o'clock in the morning, and people are coming in to get their morning coffee to go to work, thinking, who is this group of half a dozen, 8 people all on the piss? And it's like, well, no, to us it's nighttime, we're going to go home and that's our week wrapped up. So because of this environment, we normalize a lot of these experiences. And then when challenges do, I guess, come in time, or maybe the cracks start to form, it's easy. What we're finding is it's easy, and in my own experience, to see that everybody else seems to have it together, and maybe I don't. And so when the supports aren't necessarily readily available, or there's not as much support there, there might be a mistrust, or with the support that is available, there's all of these different complex factors that come into play. So it becomes it can become quite an environment where people aren't necessarily going so great. They're not at their best, and there really is a lack of support there to be able to help them through that. So which is, I guess, one of the driving forces behind why we exist.
Matt, what I'm interested in is dark humor, within this environment. How important a role is it to be able to just be a little bit raw? Because I know that, some of the things that we've joked about, in the military with mates is extremely inappropriate when it comes to the normal world. But how do you find dark humor, and what's its place in the daily life of people that are going through these things?
Yeah, I think it has such an important place. And over time, so you go back, I joined the police in 2006. Things were a little bit different. I got out in 2016. So things, I guess, even still, we're talking 10 years on now as well. And society has changed, expectations have changed. And I know then that becomes quite difficult for military and first responders to sometimes navigate those new expectations when we've been involved in really difficult, really challenging, potentially really traumatic experiences. And we may have been able to find a way of coping with or dealing with some of those situations by like almost making light of it or making a joke of it. And it's not to say that we necessarily believe the things that we're saying or that we think, those things to be true. Rather, it's a way of, I think, almost us trying to make light of or make sense of a really challenging time that we need to get through. So is it important? I think it is. I think it's a really fundamental part of how humans, because it doesn't seem to be like just an Australian thing or a South Australian thing. Like we're talking, this is a common thread amongst, military and first responders and others that work in really challenging roles. We find this dark humor, this black humor shows up a lot, where people are like, I don't know if we're allowed to say that, but there's clearly a way in which we're able to process maybe some really challenging moments in time by trying to find some humor through it. And even if it's just for shock value or for just like a processing thing, they're comments that we would likely think that we wouldn't share those again anywhere else. Like the way that we might speak to each other at a really traumatic incident and maybe some of the jokes that we might make, we wouldn't even think to make those jokes maybe if we're sitting at a barbecue with our like civilian friends, because you'd be like, I can't say this thing. I know it's not necessarily acceptable. So it seems to be that there's clearly there's value to it as a way of coping with or working through like a really heavy or difficult time. And I think to some extent, we see this play out even in, when you think about stories that are told to us through like watching movies. Rarely do we watch a movie where it is just hard and heavy the entire, hour and a half, 2 hours. It's often broken up with moments of lightheartedness, maybe some joy or something breaks that whole heaviness.
Yeah.
I think that's
the hero's journey.
100%.
Then it gets bad, then it's good
Exactly
again.
right. Exactly right. And we hear it time and time again when people are in like right in the thick of it, that someone said something that might be a little bit funny, it lightens the mood, it breaks the focus, does something. I think that this is clearly a fundamental part of navigating through really difficult times for humans. So I think we want to be really careful about saying like, let's not do that, or there's got to be I think a time and a place, and also understanding the context is really important.
And I think it's almost like, again, I use this term loosely, but it's our collective right as people who have had these experiences to have the liberties to be a little bit, loose around the edges. And it's going to draw me to team separation. But just one of the little dark humor things that we used to do in Afghanistan is we used to have a rocket lotto, like a rocket raffle.
Yeah.
So, the base would get rocketed from outside, and it was like $5 into the hat from everybody in the group. And every day, someone's number came up, and if the rocket hit when it was your number, you pocketed the money. So it was like, just funny little lighthearted things that we did to kill the time. But, those things were a pretty moderately serious threat, if you're on the wrong end of it, that's for sure. But once someone told me something long ago, and I'll throw Jay Callabone here, is PTSD stands for post-team separation disorder. And when and I know that's a flippant comment relative to the care and that, but using that phrase as a light term, the way that we deal with things as a team when we're with our peers, when we're collectively going through those moments together and dark humor and that, to then being on the outside and not having that environment to release. What's your thoughts on that in terms of how we deal with things whilst we're still in, whilst we normalize it with each other versus when we get out and then, geez, I'm by myself. Who am I talking to about this now?
Yeah, exactly right. Well, I think if we come back to, I guess, a fundamental core human need is that like the need to be around other people. Like there needs to be a sense of belonging and a sense of tribe. That's just for human beings. We're a pack animal. We know that like isolation, long-term loneliness can have almost a significant physical impact on our well-being as like long-term smoking can. So we know that there's impacts in that sense of isolation. So when we come into these particular environments, where now it's very dangerous. Often there's a high level of trust. There's a high level of purpose in these environments as well. Like what it is that we're doing and why it is that we exist is for often a higher purpose that is difficult to find in almost any other roles in community unless we get really creative. So when we've got really close-knit teams that we can, our lives depend on each other in some of these environments, and then we separate and break away from that, the desire to find that again remains. And so when you think about even going back to thousands of years ago, to exile someone from a village was a punishment far greater than death. That was like the punishment beyond. So that sense of remove, whether it's by choice or maybe by other means, people are physically or psychologically injured and then have to be removed or remove themselves from that team environment can have quite a significantly detrimental impact on our well-being. Because to your point, when we've been in stress or struggle before, we've been able to rely on the team of people around us to help us through those difficult times. So when we're now out of that environment, and we face stress or struggle, or even just that sense of not knowing what our purpose is anymore, or where that sense of belonging and that sense of isolation, whether it's perceived or real, this is where we now start to find humans that go through a really difficult time, people who really struggle. And I think to your point about some of the stuff with PTSD symptoms, like I don't subscribe to the narrative that when people join these jobs, the hourglass turns and we wait for them to become sick. That's not, I don't believe that. I think that these roles that people do, military first responder roles, we are trained to a way that in many instances is far greater. We're far more capable than many of people in society. There's a sense of like protection when we're in these roles, that we're actually a better version of ourselves maybe than what we were previously, which I think is then when we step out of these roles, it starts to become a bit of a challenge because we feel like we've left this behind. It's like, no, we take this stuff with us. We need to just repurpose the training. So when I think to your point around that post-team separation, absolutely has an impact because often, I guess even some of the work that we're doing now around this post-traumatic growth concepts, the work that we do with military and first responders, and we will be doing into the future in partnership with the Boulder Crest Foundation out of America, is that much of the difference of what might be considered highly trainable skills that kept me alive when I was in the police now might be the things that doctors might use as symptomology to justify a diagnosis for PTSD. And the only thing that's changed is the environment in which I show up with those symptoms. Now, that's not for all symptoms. I appreciate, I have a diagnosis of PTSD myself. I still at times struggle with nightmares and other physiological impacts that come with that. However, I'm a byproduct of my training. I have been trained to be hyper alert to my environment so that I can keep myself and others safe. Now, super helpful when it's 2 o'clock in the morning and I've just stopped maybe a couple of bikies that are in full colors. That's actually a really useful skill to be able to be hyper alert to their body language, the tone of voice, the way in which they're speaking to me. Are they lying? Are they safe? All these questions super helpful. But now when I'm maybe in a busy place like Woolworths with my daughter and we're doing our grocery shopping and I'm having the same physiological responses and the same threat assessments of everybody around me, that can overwhelm like me physically and psychologically and result in something that might then show up as a PTSD symptom. Now, the only thing that changed is the environment. So if we can find the dimmer switch on some of that, as well as the education around some of this, I think that's where like the focus point for us is to say we need to go back to humans who are highly capable, they've been highly trained, they've done some incredible things through their life and through their career. And because they're not wearing the uniform anymore, that does not make them less than or weaker. Rather, we just have to repurpose some of that training and find that greater sense connection back to tribe and belonging. And I think then we'll start to overcome some significant mental health challenges.
Oh, dude, it's funny because we're still the same person. It's just like you said, that the environment's changed. And so for me, I woke up at about 3 o'clock this morning and sometimes I have these moments. If I wake up, I'm just like, I'm a shot duck. I'm not going back to sleep here. So, tried to listen to a pod, certainly not this one. Tried to go back to sleep for half an hour. And then I was just like, nah, get up. So I got up and I was like, okay, I'm just going to go for a walk. So it was about 3:30 in the morning or something. I'm just sort of walking around the neighborhood. And then it's going to sound a bit funny, but I saw this other guy just walking as well. And he went into the servo and he was sort of like creeping around the servo a little bit. So I got to admit, man, I did go around the corner and just hide behind the bushes and watch him, just because I didn't know he's going to try and rob this place or something like that. But I think he just had a few beers. But like that was literally just my natural instinct was to like, what's going on here? I don't understand that. Like, is that guy under threat? The guy that's in the server at the middle of the night, it's 3:30 in the morning. What kind of weirdos are out at this time of day? Including me.
Well, and I think you raise a really important point here, because many listeners that may not be military or first responder background might hear that scenario and first go, why are you walking around at 3 in the morning? That's dangerous. And secondly, now that you've actually seen a threat, most people would probably either contact the police or they would just go home and just try to get out of that area. Whereas your natural response, your default setting was, I know that I have a particular skill set that might not be as refined as it used to be. However, some of this situation doesn't look right to me. So I'm going to hang around and see if I can in some way be of service still to my community. And so if I then think about, like, if I was the parent or the spouse or partner of the person working at the service station, would I not be grateful that there's people who are walking around at 3 in the morning that are observing other people's behavior, and in the event something happened, that there are still people in community that are ready to step up and meet the challenge when it arises? I'd like to hope there's still that recognition of boundaries and knowing where your skill set may lay now. But this is the sort of stuff that we talk about, is that when we talk about like assimilating military and first responders back into the civilian world, we want to be really mindful that we don't frame it as almost like forget what you used to do and what you've become. Rather, let's find a place for this to fit. And we don't then want vigilantes now roaming the streets at 3 a.m., spying on service stations. But there is absolutely an immense value. If I'm going to be taking, my family to the city to watch the footy on the weekend, it's 10 o'clock at night, we're getting on the train, there's a few, sort of like the pissed idiots that are around. Would I not want to draw on my skill set of having a heightened level of awareness of my environment and make then decisions that can help keep my family safe? Or do I do what 95% of the population do and bury my head in my phone and then wonder why, when things kick off, that I'm now stuck in the middle of it and throw out the, like, oh, I didn't see that coming. So I think that's, like, to your point, there's some really important parts of the training that we've had and the way that we view the world that is still very much useful. We just don't want to be putting that in the bin or saying, well, it doesn't belong anywhere anymore. Like, it absolutely does. We have all this training. Why would I want to put that on the shelf and forget about it? So yeah, it's finding the balance.
And we're also allowed to own it. We're also allowed to own those feelings and own that the sense of who we are and combining those lives. And my point is always being in the army was the best job I've ever had in my life. And I had so many different jobs. And when I got out of the military, it was definitely a sense of, I wanted to put it aside. I wanted to create a bit of a new identity for myself, because that identity was all consuming at that time.
Yeah.
The uniform, the purpose, all of that. And I did want to break, but it's funny enough, one of the reasons I do VBC full time is you mentioned tribe, community. There's a reason we called Veteran Business Community this, because ultimately we are a group of like-minded people with shared experience who talk about business. But I just love when I hear of people that maybe served in the the 80s or the 90s or the 2000s, and they don't have a connection back to that important part of their life. And we just hope that through VBC here, that, it's a place where we can come talk shop, and I don't care if you swear or,
Yeah.
you don't have to be politically correct.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's that sense of like how it used to be, or this is somewhere that I feel familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Matt, I'd love to talk about the business now. Struggle Well, that little logo you've got into the top right-hand corner. I've been looking at it quite a little bit during this conversation. I love that as a fundamental, because, and just my impressions is, Struggle Well to me acknowledges the struggle, but acknowledges the, number one, maybe the comfortableness of being in the struggle, but an aspirational point of this won't beat me.
Yes. Yeah.
Just where did you guys come up with Struggle Well, and tell us about why you started the business?
Yeah. So Struggle Well is not ours. This is the relationship with Boulder Crest Foundation in America, which I can talk to a little bit as well. But I think the reason why it is that we find ourselves aligning quite closely with Boulder Crest for the Struggle Well program in particular is because of that shared values. We view the world, I guess, in a similar way, but also, like I said, coming back to those concepts of, we believe that if we are able to best educate military and first responders in understanding what mental health is, what the mental health literacy looks like, that we can empower people with regulation, well-being strategies, things that, I guess, not dissimilar to maybe our weapons drills that we might do, our physical training that we might do in the gym. If we're able to give people the knowledge and the practices to look after their own well-being, that we can also have like mentally fit individuals that work in these environments until such time that they choose that they want to then separate away from them. But then we also want to foster a culture of disclosure. I think what we have noticed, and certainly in my time in the police, anecdotally from a sample size of one, is that we didn't talk about this stuff. It was perceived to still be like a sign of weakness, and that I'm not as good as everybody else if I felt like I was struggling at times in my career. And what we know as humans, we've been talking about celebrations and struggles and life's challenges for thousands and thousands of years. We used to sit around fires, back in the day, and we would just share what the day looked like, what our futures looked like. And we fostered this culture of disclosure where it built trust, it built connection, I guess that ability to be vulnerable. And often what we're finding now in the work that I've been working with military and first responders now, like pretty heavily since 2018, and certainly my 10 years in the police, it wasn't really something that I experienced. And it's not something that often we experience. When we talk to people who are going through their careers and having a really great time, and then even a great separation, or maybe not necessarily picked up a lot of the symptomology, more often than not, it's because there's been a space where they've had a trusted connection with other people that they've been able to talk about their struggles. And to your point, one thing in life we can guarantee is that struggle will happen. That is it. And if as a human species, if we had avoided struggle, we wouldn't be here. Because for ever since the dawn of time, we have encountered difficulty. And then we've not only worked through that difficulty, we've overcome it, we've understood maybe how to approach difficulty differently in the future. And we have then become, I guess, better versions of ourselves because of it. So Struggle Well is the program that Boulder Crest Foundation has put together, built on the post-traumatic growth concepts. Now, post-traumatic growth is a term that some people may have heard before. It's been around since probably the early 90s when two psychologists, and I won't bore people too much with the story, but two psychologists went looking for an answer to the question, where does wisdom come from? And what they found was that when they spoke to military members in particular, and one of their biggest examples that they use for the PTG concept was the prisoners of war from Vietnam. And they often talk about the Hanoi Hilton is what it was coined as. And so here's this group of individuals, these military members who had been subjected to torture and to awful treatment for many, many years that they had been captured for. The families were advised when the war was over and these people were returning, these men were returning, the families were advised, be mindful of the fact that probably for most of them, they're going to be institutionalized following this because of what they've been subjected to. Now, at the time, PTSD, as it is now understood, was impacting military to about 30% of the military were being impacted by post-traumatic stress. Of those that came back from the prisoners of war camp, they found that only 4% of them showed indications of PTSD. And in fact, those that were, I guess, picked up that label were those that had spent the least amount of time in the prisoner of war camp. Now, I'm not in any way diminishing that experience and suggesting that we want to be grateful for that experience. However, what we're saying is that what they wanted to look for is how is it that people could go through that experience and come out, and even ongoing studies have shown that for many of them, they outperform in almost all domains of life, from physical health to financial success to business success to the way that they view their world, their family success, because of this experience. So it's more of this concept of, well, rather than just trying to survive through difficult time, how is it that we can get through difficult time and then become wiser because of it? So it's not that concept of what kills me, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger, but it's more of a concept of what doesn't kill me makes me wiser, providing we then start looking at what those experiences are. And I think that's, to society's point, unfortunately, I think in what I often feel like or see is that we've been told that we want to avoid stress, we want to avoid struggle. If this is uncomfortable or difficult, that we want to steer clear from it. It's like, well, if you mentioned the hero's journey before, if you look at anyone who was, I guess, considered either in their right or in our perspective as being successful, show me someone who's just had an easy life and has just, woke up one day and just had all this success. Like, everyone's got stories. Everyone has got like those difficult stuff that they've managed to get through. They've made sense of it. They've made meaning from it. And they've gone on to be, I guess, a better version of themselves. Again, not diminishing the challenges that people have gone through, though.
Well, mate, and I'm absolutely no philosopher or psychologist, but back to that, steel is forged in the fire. That's where strength come from.
Yep.
And I just sort of come back to a couple of things you mentioned there was how it's really challenging to put our own experiences against somebody else's, because particularly I feel in the military that there is always, I often relate it to fitness and wealth. No matter where you are on the spectrum, there's always probably someone way ahead of you, but there's always probably someone way behind you as well there somewhere. And it doesn't really make sense to compare yourself against others. Like, I was a loggy officer who spent most of my time on my deployments in a bed, who had cappuccino every day and worked on a computer. So I have this sort of inferiority complex to the warfighters, because they went out and they did that kind of stuff. But then I've spoken to other warfighters that they were like, but I was an SAS. And then I've spoken to other SAS guys. Well, like, I'm not one of them. So we're always at this state of comparing ourselves. And even when you were mentioning before, like, when your wife came home after a rough day, that's still a rough day for her in her experience. And
absolutely.
Yeah. So it's just doesn't make sense, but it's a totally normal human thing to do. It is to compare. But yeah, let's come back. Enough of me, back to Frontline, mate. What are the products you do and how do you serve people?
Yeah. So one of the things that we wanted to set up right from the beginning was that we have experienced a lot of mandatory training ourselves in the environments that we come from. And we knew that for many of us, they were either PowerPoint, like death by PowerPoint presentations, where someone just spoke at you for half a day or a day and then hoped that something would stick. Or it was like an online thing where you just press play on a couple of videos. And generally what would happen is the most junior member would get everybody's login and then they would be told to do all the mandatory training. And then you would just be told at the end of the shift that yours was done. And so we thought, well, that's not really what we want to be doing. How is it that we might be able to provide meaningful and valuable training to people? So which is why we went down the path of making sure that our stuff was customized to the audience in which we were looking to deliver it. So when we first started, our first big project was working with defense, current serving defense. And one particular unit that had come to us and said, you guys have military background. You also have the mental health background. Can you please create something for us that is maybe a little bit more nuanced? Because we've looked around and there's probably a few things that might fit, but not all of it fits. We weren't sure, no worries. Like, what is it that you want to learn and what is it that you want to understand? And then we took from the bosses, we built something. We then went and spoke to some of the middle team leaders and said, some of the warrant officers said, hey, this is what the people above you are suggesting that your people need to hear. They then added some of their own stuff. We tweaked it, we refined it, and then we went and ran the program. Off the back of that, we then found that what was originally Frontline was going to be just this one little side project. We never expected it to be what it is. It landed, and people were like, yeah, this is actually useful. This was valuable. This was meaningful. We were delivering content to them that realistically, some of the content they should have known because it's part of their mandatory training, but we delivered it in a way that brought our own trust and credibility to the room. So what is it that we offer? We offer the customized mental health education. So that looks like lots of different things. Our website showcases a few of the programs that we deliver, things like mental health and well-being. Sometimes people want to get into like stress and resilience and what the relationship there. We're finding that we have a program called Stress, Resilience and Functioning. The chief psychiatrist for DVA, Associate Professor John Lane, developed that program. He has provided us with that program so we can then run that with military and first responders with really great impact and success. But local government, corporate, we work with councils, we've worked in the media industry, rail, mining, and often the first questions that we have to leaders is, how long have we got with your people and what are we hoping to achieve in that time? So that might be drawn from a particular challenge, workplace culture, bullying, sexual harassment, whatever. It might also come from performance output or performance optimization, some places like to call it. How do we get people to continue to sustain themselves in a really high stress environments? And then we start looking at, well, what impact can we make in whatever time we might have them? So sometimes it looks like a day course, a half day. We always look to do longer term partnerships with organizations because we know that coming in and delivering 1 day workshop and then not doing anything for the next couple of years, to be honest, is like not really going to have this anywhere near the same level of impact as maybe doing a couple of touch points with people over the course of maybe 6 months or 12 months. So a number of the organizations that we work with now, we look at doing more of like a calendar of events where we are then looking at, well, what does 12 months worth of delivering half-day workshops look like so that we can capture all of the staff and create opportunities for trust in their organization with us, but also that embedded learning so that people are hearing some of these concepts, they've got opportunities to try them, and then like come back to us with questions. And so one of the other final piece to that is we do the best we can to make sure that it's more of an engaged, facilitated conversation rather than just, you don't want us standing at the front of the room, clicking through PowerPoints and then just, asking you questions at the end. Like that's boring. So we try to get, and it also, I think we miss an opportunity to tap into the expertise that's in the room.
Yeah.
Like some of these organizations, they've been going for a while and people have been working there for years. Why would I not want to ask people questions and learn from them as well? So, we look to facilitate conversations rather than just belt feed information.
Right. One of the things just listening to you speak now is I sort of, for some reason, again, I'm a very, very, very non-psychologist or philosopher, but it brings me back to the sort of Nietzsche / Viktor Frankl kind of stuff where, about purpose. Going back to the forge of steel in the fire, I think it was Nietzsche that said, someone who has a why to live can do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Or can suffer or bear anything, maybe. The second one from Frankl, I think it was something along the lines of, the true freedom we have is in the action and the space between action and reaction.
Mm.
I want to come to purpose now.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you feel you're living a life of purpose now doing this frontline stuff? I'm just listening to the way you're talking with, spending time in the coppers. Is this your thing now?
Yeah, it is. And interestingly, to that point, my wife asked me a question some years ago now, a couple of years ago. She said, do you think you do what you do now because of what happened? Or did you need that to happen to do what you do now? And so when I got out of the police, it was out in like quite dramatic circumstances. I was very unwell, thoughts and behaviors around suicide. I made some really foolish decisions at work, which resulted in me getting sacked. There's other podcasts and stuff where I speak about that quite openly. And so her question, I think, was a really valid one. So is this a byproduct of my past experiences, or is this actually part of the story? And I think to some extent, it didn't really matter. Like, here I am. And so here, to your point, I now need to, I want to still live a life of purpose. And interestingly, others in my world of friendship groups and things have said, I find it interesting that you probably have more of an impact now in the military and first responder community and the broader community than when you wore uniform. And so I think that's their perception. From me, I think that the reasons why I joined the police were to be of service to my community, to be part of something bigger than just myself, and to hopefully leave this place a little bit better, ideally a little bit better, when I leave. And when I think about some of those reasons, they certainly tie into what I do now. I don't wear a police uniform. I now obviously wear the Frontline logo. But it's still those things still resonate with me. I'm still trying to be of service to my community. I still want others to live a life that is, I guess, the best versions of themselves. And particularly with these military and first responder roles, I don't think that the well-being of the individuals has to be the sacrifice of service. I truly believe that we can have both. And so I think about then, am I on purpose? I believe so. Like, I wake up each day and go like, I'm going to do the best I can to continue doing this work. Is that like sometimes, like, I think in fairness, Pete, you probably found this yourself in business. You go, you know what? I throw the toys out the sandbox and I'm just like, I'm going to go get a job. I'll go do something. I'll stack shelves at Audi or something like that. Something that's got nothing to do with mental health or trying to promote cultural change. I get frustrated with executive leaders of organizations and I just think, what am I doing? But then I get the question of, well, what's the alternative? Is to not work in this space? Well, I can't then get upset, when things still keep happening, when I still keep losing friends to suicide as a result of some of the cultural challenges in these organizations and these roles. Like, I have to, in my mind, I have to still be of service and contributing in some way. And I'm not, despite my really difficult separation from SAPA, I'm not anti-police. I'm not anti these roles. In fact, quite the opposite. I'm a staunch advocate for good people joining military and first responder roles. I think we just need to provide them with better and more education around how to keep themselves well so that they can choose when they leave these organizations, rather than becoming, I guess, victim to environment and certainly a victim to, say, poor mental health and anything that shows up there. So long-winded answer to say I'm on purpose, absolutely. And I think that it's fundamental for humans. We can tolerate extremely high levels of distress, providing we have a reason why.
Mate, what your wife said to you was extremely insightful. And I'm trying to pose the question to myself. Do you mind just posing it to me for a second? Because I want to just unpack it, because I heard it, but I just want to hear it again in my head.
So if I pose this question then to you, Pete, with all of the things that you do now in 2025, approaching 2026, do you do what you do now because of your past experiences, or were those past experiences required so that you could be on purpose to do the things that you currently do?
Yeah. It's a fascinating question, because for me, prior to joining the military, and I joined the military late, I had my 31st birthday, like 2 weeks after I joined. So I was a farmer before that, worked on the land and did all sorts of things. But for me, and again, my military career was remarkably unspectacular. I was not, a blip on the radar in terms of my impact on the place. But through the connection and the relationship with purpose and the people is why I do this here with VBC. And I find that as I mature slightly, I hope it's not a negative thing, but I'm almost feeling a little bit paternalistic to other serving members or veterans in terms of my contribution back to them. Like, I don't know these people personally at all. Like, I have, apart from when I meet them through VBC, etc. But broader for the military community, I feel the kind of people they are. I have experienced their sense of purpose in terms of why that group joins and serves. And maybe similar to you, hopefully through what I do with VBC will hopefully have an enduring contribution to them and their lives and people that I'll never meet. And maybe that will be my ultimate contribution to service, because I do sometimes feel like, why do I cling on to this thing? You know, it was such a fantastic part of my life. And here I am basically dedicating this immediate next chapter of my life 100% fully to building this community and this sort of business infrastructure. So I thought, man, your wife's far cleverer than me to ask you that question, mate. So I've just taken a moment to sort of consider it. But I think for me, without joining the military, I may have felt that my sense of purpose may not have been fulfilled in that way, or maybe I would have found it in some other way. But the fact that I did leads me to this point now where I can feel that I contribute fully and very comfortably waking up every single day and doing this. I really, really love it.
Yeah. And I would suggest then that at your core sense of yourself is really of being service, and which is likely why you're then drawn to roles like military. And I think for many in service roles, and I certainly respect those that go, well, it was either that or maybe, you know, like a completely different life. I needed the military or first responder space to get out of, you know, the town, to create opportunity, whatever that may be. I respect all of those. I think we don't also force people to do any of these jobs either. They're often drawn to them for various reasons, and there's a common thread of what you just spoke about, wanting to be of service. So I suspect that when we do get out, you could still be of service if you're the door greeter at Bunnings, you know, and you can
absolutely.
you can still be having that level of connection and purpose. Here is someone who wants to create a project on their weekend. What part can I play in helping this come to life? Well, you can point them in the right direction. They can find the tools that they need, you know. So I think it's often the way that we frame it or the way that we view it. But I think some of the challenges around identity, you know, are massive. And people still say to me, and maybe they could say to you, that we still have an identity issue, because I still work with military and first responders. But I argue, well, to me, it's an important part of who I am. The 10 years that I did in the police is an important part of me. I'm like still proud of it. I wouldn't change anything if I had my time again. I'm grateful for the friends that I made. I'm grateful for the experiences. You know, like I said, the separation out was an extremely difficult time for me and my family. However, I wouldn't be here had it not been for those experiences. And as well as if someone had said to me back in 2015, when I was having thoughts that others would be better off if I wasn't here, I think that if someone just said, "Hey, look, just wait until 2018 and you'll meet, you know, John Lane, and you'll meet Narelle and Adam, and, you know, that'll set in place a series of events you'll start this business, and in 2025 you'll be, you know, you have your own office and there'll be 9 people on the team and we'll be having all these, you know, meetings with people." I'd be like, "Oh, okay, well, I'd probably put my feet up on the couch and just wait." But nobody said that. Like, you have to go after it. Like, there's the personal responsibility piece of, for me, like, you know, to your comment again about hero's journey, it's about, well, you know, what do I learn from all of this? What skills can I take forward? And back in 2016, my idea of a successful day was getting up at 6 a.m. when my alarm went off and just doing one thing, like the dishes or mowing the lawn. If I could do that, like, I was winning. And so then I started to stack some of those wins together. And now I guess, you know, life looks very different. You know, I do the best I can to still be a husband and father when I'm around and I'm at home. I have 2 businesses, one of which obviously is Frontline Mental Health. We spend a lot of time traveling, a lot of time developing the business. It's growing very quickly, which is great. It demands a lot of my time. This version of me wouldn't have been able to, well, the 2016 version of me wouldn't have been able to do this. So I think it's always just, for me, is recognizing where we're at in life's story, in my life story. And it's not a better or worse. It's just, this is where I am right now, and this is what I'm able to do. So how can I be purposeful today? Is, you know, what skills do I have? What interests do I have? And yeah, where do I get that sense of meaning? And at the moment, this is it. So I'll keep focusing all of my energy here.
I love it, mate. I just listening to you there, I can just mirroring myself, are we weirdos that we're not letting go of that life, and we're still clinging on to that, that thing that defined us. I can just hear some people out there going, just let it go, mate. Just let it go. Crack on. Do something else.
Put it behind you.
I've really appreciated you coming on and having a yarn with me today. I think it's so special when you do find that purpose. And, like people find purpose in many different ways, like whether it be supporting the local cricket or soccer club on the weekend, or just being, a good mum or dad or brother, partner, husband, whatever it is. But for some of us that take a dive into a deeper level of service, it does influence and carry on to who we are, in many, many different chapters of our life. So, mate, well done for you and the team and what you do in Frontline, and really appreciate just coming on and having a yarn with me today.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
So look, I'm going to wrap it there. Matt Newlands from Frontline Mental Health. Just want to say thanks for coming on and sharing your story, and and sharing things that were rather private and personal. And for anyone else out there, if you've been separated from your military life or your first responder life, there are organizations out there that are not just clubs or but something like the VBC. The purpose we are here is to give people, number one, a sense of connection and a place to learn and share. Anyone is welcome. We don't care, what service you're in, whether you're full-time or part-time, like whether you're deployed or not, none of that matters. And I would love to see us, Matt, be able to expand this one day into encompassing first responders as well, because we are brethren or sisters or, family in terms of, and we have so much more in common than apart, the first responder in the military space.
Absolutely. No, I really appreciate it. And we've got so much value out of being part of the VBC as well, just to have other like-minded individuals that have similar backgrounds to us and help celebrate our success and help drive us forward as well. It's a really positive environment. Yeah,
I do sound like a bit of a tosser when I say this, but I would love to help to think that we could build a tribe together.
Yeah.
And that tribe is people, because if we were to meet, at a bar or a coffee shop and say, hey, I was a copper, I was a soldier or a sailor, airman or fiery or something, then instantly we're probably going to sit down and have a yarn and talk about experiences and maybe even, a bit of dark humor. But when we bring these relationships into business, I think it's super powerful, and we've got a really good foundation of trust in terms of, because that one of my big things about, veteran and first responder businesses is that it's the character or people behind the business that should make us a point of difference and why people should choose us. So you don't have to make us a point of preference, but absolutely look at us as a point of difference in terms of why, we would be a great provider or in your supply chain. But mate, thank you for your time.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
I'm going to wrap it there. My name's Pete Liston, and thanks for listening to another episode of the VBC Podcast. Out.